afternoon, everyone. You're listening to CaMMVetsMedia on WVOX 1460, heard around the world on WVOX.com. This is Jack McGuirk with Kraetzer, bringing you this half hour of discussion of issues related to veterans and the active military. Now, here's Ken.
Hey, thanks, Jack, and good afternoon, everyone listening to CaMMVetsMedia here on WVOX. We cover cadets, midshipmen, the military, and veterans proudly since 2008. Thanks to Ryan's working the board for us today. And first, I wanted to, we've been following the damage at West Point. I just saw a note before coming out that Senator Schumer estimates the damage at West Point from the storm last Sunday at $100 million. And we heard the garrison commander, Colonel Anthony Biaggi last week, specify that 4 major internal roads at West Point were damaged, 8 to 9 major buildings, 135 homes at work orders, of which they considered about 20 seriously damaged. I got to find out how many homes are at West Point. I could see it maybe being around 500, because this is for all of the officers who teach there, work there, and a lot of the NCOs who work training and manage West Point. They all get a house of some level, depending on rank. My mother used to describe that process when she was an Army wife and went to a new base. Second half of the show, we're going to talk to Captain Frank Russo, president of the Navy League of New York, and talk about the 60 Minutes episode on the Navy as challenges posed by China. And this is a Norah O'Donnell interview, which was originally aired in March, but they re-aired it and they put some new material on it. And they talked with Admiral Samuel Paparo, who is the commander of the Indo-Pacific U.S. Navy Fleet. And the word is he is the candidate to become Chief of Navy Operations, and this interview helped his candidacy to become the #1 officer in the U.S. Navy.
Wow.
So Frank's going to fill us in on that, Captain Frank, and I know you got a lot happening on veterans and military.
Yeah, I'll start off with Ukraine. President Biden on Thursday authorized U.S. military leaders to deploy as many as 3,000 reservists to Europe in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The order is intended to augment the U.S. troops already overseas as part of Operation Atlantic Resolve, the president said in a statement. And he was actually over in Europe on a two-day NATO summit in Lithuania. But Operation Atlantic Resolve is an initiative that was launched in the wake of the invasion of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, designed to enhance the deterrence posture along with the eastern flank of the U.S. NATO's allies. The president affirmed the U.S.'s continued support of Ukraine throughout his European trip as the former Soviet state carried out a slow-moving counteroffensive meant to take back the Russian-controlled areas in the southern eastern part of Ukraine. But 3,000 reservists looks like they're going to be sent to Europe.
Were they Army?
Didn't say.
I gotta think they're Army,
probably.
primarily, and I'd be interested to find out where they're going. We're hearing about quite a few West Point grads going to Poland, and obviously the Baltic, where the president just was. But that's reinforcement. I bet there are groups that do training on a lot of the armaments that the U.S. and allies in the NATO alliance are providing to Ukraine.
Indeed, and Britain sent long-range Storm Shadow cruise missiles to Ukraine in May, and France pledged a shipment of the same missiles, what you call scalps, as NATO leaders gathered in Lithuania. But for now, at least, the U.S. is still hesitant to send Ukraine any of its limited stock of long-range Army tactical missile systems, also known as ATACMSs or ATACMS. Even though the Biden administration acknowledges that these forces are running dangerous low on munitions, and we talked about the other missile systems there. But the Ukraine has long coveted the ATACMSs, but the U.S. has been kind of hesitant about it. But however, now 2 American officials and 1 European official described a quiet debate within the Biden administration over whether to send a few of those missiles, which are being reserved for other security threats. Now, these missiles, ATACMSs, have a range of about 190 miles, or about 40 miles more than the missiles France and Britain are providing. And these are missiles that, if Ukraine had them, they could probably hit targets in Russia. So that's the big question, whether or not you want to send those kind of missiles to Ukraine.
Yeah, it's also that you don't want to fire a missile, maybe not have it explode, and have it picked up by the Russians, and being able to take technology away from that or have it captured. But the big news that we heard from one of our guests, put this out on his Facebook page, Dan Rice, the president of their leadership group, West Point graduate, now the president of the university in Kiev, that Ukrainians will now be trained to fly F-16s, and which will give them some air capability over the country. I don't know how many months of training it takes, at least several months, but Dan Rice had put that out. He's been a guest on our show. I had to call him up again so you can call in. He's been very active on the scene in Ukraine.
Yeah, the training of the Ukrainian pilots is set to begin in August in Romania. And the training, they're saying, is going to be no longer than 6 months. But at this point, not one country has committed to sending any F-16s to Ukraine so far. But the Netherlands and Denmark are leading an 11-nation coalition to train Ukrainian pilots on the Western fighter jets, which Ukraine argues would help turn the tide of the war in its favor. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. But F-16 training starting in August.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to bring up. Exactly whose F-16s are going to be piloted by the Ukrainians. Is it going to be one of the NATO allies, or is the United States going to allow some number of F-16s from its reservoir of planes? And we'll see.
Indeed. And speaking of F-16s, the U.S. is beefing up its fighter jets around the strategic Strait of Hormuz to protect ships from Iranian seizures, senior defense officials said last week. And the U.S. will send F-16 fighter jets to the Gulf region to augment the A-10 attack aircraft that have been patrolling there for more than a week. Move comes after Iran tried to seize 2 oil tankers near the strait last week. Now, in both of those instances, the Iranian naval vessels backed off when the USS McFall, a guided missile destroyer, arrived on the scene. But they're also keeping an eye on the Russian fighter jets that have been going after drones there over Syria and the Middle East. So F-16s on the way to the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, there was an article out about F-35s, America's premier fighter plane, and how many NATO allies are using it and how much they like it, that they're ordering more. And one of the things they said is it shares technology and communications very well. So it kind of unites these countries because in the platform that they're using these F-35s.
And we're keeping an eye on whether or not Sweden is going to be joining NATO. It looks like they're sort of inching closer to that. But Turkish President Erdogan said last week that Sweden's NATO membership bid would not be ratified by Turkey's parliament before October. But he hopes for a swift ratification once lawmakers return from a break. Now, Turkey on Monday withdrew its objections to Sweden joining the alliance, which is a step forward towards Sweden joining NATO. But we're going to keep an eye on that one.
Well, that's one of the big accomplishments, I think, for President Biden at this NATO summit was being able to find a way for Turkey to move the application of Sweden to NATO along. As you said, it'll probably be approved in October. Apparently, the United States is going to give Turkey additional F-16s, fighter planes, and that was part of the inducement. As long as they did say that was not a direct exchange, but it's good to see that Sweden is going to be able to join NATO. NATO looks very united right now, and in its support of Ukraine. Now, one of the things I want to mention, I was saying to Jack just before the show that we watched Fareed Zakaria's show on CNN on Sundays, and he had a guest, Eric Schmidt, who was a former chairman of Google, and now he works for, he's affiliated with a couple of defense innovation organizations, and he talked about the impact of drones, and that how many that are being used. They said Ukraine needs 200,000 drones this year. Because they said most drones only last 1 or 2 flights, and they must be going through 500 or 600 a day. They said the Russians are good at jamming drones, knocking out their GPS, but they said what works are these cruise missile drones that fly very fast, that are very hard to be knocked down. And they said the thing that Ukraine needs is factories to build these drones. Mm-hmm. To build hundreds every day, and they're not quite there yet. And the other thing he said they need are laser-guided weapons. And they said this is more important than the fighter planes because they're concerned the fighter planes can be attacked by surface to air missiles that the Russians have. So there's all these factors. We're going to talk to Frank Russo about this. So many modern or new ways of fighting, there's no other way to put it, are being tested out in Ukraine right now. And drones right at the center of it. You know, swarms of drones. You know, the U.S. Navy's worried about that. What happens when you get attacked, you know, by some number of hundred drones on a ship?
Mm-hmm.
I guess they can't fly that far. And that's one limiting factor to see, but that's the thing
WVOX.
that Eric Schmidt, former chairman of Google, said last night on Zakaria show on CNN. It was interesting. Zakaria made a point that about
so right now we're about to head towards a commercial break, so I'm going to put you on hold until after the break.
By autocratic states, Russia, China, Iran,
No
and
problem.
North Korea.
You've been listening to CaMMVetsMedia on WVOX AM 1460, heard around the world on WVOX.com. We'll be right back after the free Fox News break, so stay tuned.
Okay, so your guest is on.
Okay, can I say hello?
Yeah, sure.
How much time is this break gonna be?
In the north end of New Rochelle, you'll find an
Probably about a
absolutely
minute
top-notch
and a
printer,
half.
one of the
Okay,
very
so
best in the
pretty
entire county. Minuteman Press
Hey, Frank.
is known for its fine work far beyond the
thanks for,
South Shore
calling
area. In fact, this
So,
particular
we'll talk a
Minuteman
little
Press
bit about,
is certainly the class of
you
the
know,
fleet when it comes to full-service
Dallas
community
conference that
printing,
you went
located
to.
just off
No, going
North
to
Avenue
the,
in New Rochelle
you know,
in the
the
narrow
60
Wackegill walkway
minutes,
across the parking lot
episode.
from Acme. Minuteman Press is a terrific resource for individual
Yeah.
and small to medium-sized companies who
and,
want something
the
very
Admiral
special when it
Pizarro,
comes to printing.
doing
No
this
matter
thing,
how big or how small your needs,
You know, that-
you'll get the skill and
it
craftsmanship
comes down to
Minuteman
is
is known
missiles.
for
It's like
at
whose
very
missiles are more
reasonable
effective,
prices.
because we
From
did
business cards to
reporting 10 years
brochures,
ago
color copies,
on
high-speed
the
printing,
Navy's
individual
Missile
booklets and
Defense
flyers,
Program.
it's
You know,
Minuteman
they
Press.
packed, they're putting
Down
them
that
on the
walkway when you're
books
headed to
and
Acme,
they could
offering
knock
quality
down,
printing at very
ICBM.
good
So I'm
prices.
wondering-
Call Minuteman Press in New
Because,
Rochelle,
Barlow is not tipping.
914-576-0335. 914-576-0335.
Westchester's favorite morning show.
I love the morning show.
Good Morning Westchester with Dennis
Yeah.
and Tom. Weekday mornings from 6 to 9.
Hey.
Right here on 1460.
Frank, we're almost done there, so we'll chat in a second.
Welcome back to CaMMVetsMedia on WVOX AM 1460, heard around the world on WVOX.com. Quick West Point football story that jumped out to me. The widow of former West Point football player Gene Merlino, he was a fullback up at West Point, passed away at the age of 55 in 2021. His widow is now suing the NCAA on the actually he died after suffering at least 14 concussions during his time as a football player. But the suit by his widow Kelly Merlino in Manhattan Supreme Court in New York alleges that the college sports group suppressed knowledge about the dangers of brain injury in football, leading to her husband's death at the age of 55 in 2021. The suit says that he had brain damage, confusion, depression, and self-medication that eventually killed him. Now, he played at West Point from 1984 to 86 and was discharged from the Army because of the brain injuries he suffered as a player. Merlino himself said that he had 14 concussions that were confirmed, and that he kept playing and that didn't let himself heal. 14 confirmed. That means he may have had more concussions than that, but sad story there. at West Point,
That's tragic. Should never have happened. We've been following concussion protocol that developed really since the NFL and the U.S. Army had a forum at West Point. I think that was in 2012 with Joe Odierno and Roger Goodell, saying to both their organizations that if you think you've had a concussion, you need to be treated that, give yourself some time to heal, so that we don't hear about stories like what you just reported, Jack, which is such important. Now we've got one of our friends on the line, actually another college football fan, and president of the Navy League Council of New York, and that is Captain Frank Russo. Frank, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Ken. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Very good. Now, first, you ran two major events from the Navy League's point of view. assisting and supporting the Navy with the commissioning of USS Cooperstown in May, and then just a few weeks later, the U.S. Navy Fleet Week that was held in New York with USS Wasp as the key ship, and also a number of international ships. What were those couple events like for you?
I tell you what, it truly was a highlight of the first half of the year. I mean, both events in and of itself would be a highlight, but to have the ability and the capacity to do both just shows what New York Council can really do. So Cooperstown, obviously bringing a ship to life, named after the 70 Baseball Hall of Famers that were veterans, working with the Hall over the last really year and a half to bring this to fruition was tremendous. And of course, the day of, we had Secretary of the Navy, bringing it to life, and the ship's sponsor, ordering the ship to come to life. So that was tremendous in and of itself. I think you top it off with Fleet Week. I think a very successful Fleet Week. It's coming back more and more post-COVID, and just the enthusiasm of the New York City area, to embrace the sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen as they come to see both U.S., Canadian, UK, and Italian ships. It's just a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, no, that was neat. Particularly locally, sailors from the Italian ship marched in the Pelham Memorial Day Parade, which was really a neat thing to see. Now, we're talking with Captain Frank Russo, president of the Navy League New York, and wanted to discuss a 60 Minutes episode that originally aired in March, and they re-aired it 2 weeks ago, 4th of July weekend. Did a little bit of an update this by Nora O'Donnell, and primarily going out to the USS Nimitz in the Western Pacific to talk to Admiral Samuel Poparo, who's the commander of the Indo-Pacific Fleet. And Frank, an interesting discussion. What was your takeaway from that?
Well, I think the Admiral did an excellent job, and we should also mention that Admiral Poparo is also been nominated by President Biden to be the next Chief of Naval Operations. Which is, he'll be responsible for all fleet readiness for the Navy as part of the joint, as part of the joint staff, and sitting on sitting on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and part of the joint, getting the Navy ready as part of the joint forces. I think the Admiral succinctly put what is the threat from China and how the Navy would respond to, if ordered by the president, to any aggression by the Chinese Navy. And I think he put it well that the Navy is ready to go to battle. Even though that said, there are certain challenges that the Navy faces going forward.
And he talked about that the U.S. Navy has about 300 ships, 100 of which are at sea, deployed at any given time, but that the People's Republic of China has, in a very limited time, 20 years, gone from 30 ships to over 300. And that's an astounding growth to the Chinese Navy.
Well, I think, throughout the entire article, in 60 Minutes, second half of the news article pointed where a serious deficiency and challenge that the country faces in the ability to build ships, not just build, but also maintain ships. They talked about the fact that, the PRC, the People's Republic of China, has invested heavily in their commercial shipbuilding capabilities. They have, I think, the largest fleet of commercial ships that takes all the goods, take a lot of the goods that come to the United States that's sold here in the U.S. from China to here. A byproduct of that is the ability to build warships. Now, building a warship is a lot different than building a commercial ship, but however, there is a lot of skill sets, lead over of the skill sets, and that capacity has allowed them to quickly gain parity with the U.S. Navy, at about 300 ships. The U.S. Navy, so in the U.S., after the Cold War, we shrank our shipbuilding capabilities, and we have other challenges that need to be faced. And when I say shipbuilding, not just building ships, but also maintaining ships. Because as the CNO had pointed out, there have been significant delays in shipbuilding and getting ships back out into the fleet. And life at sea is tough. Ships take a beating, and about every 5 to 7 years, you have to go through a maintenance period, as well as if something occurs that if there's damages to the ship during deployment or something, that has to be taken care of. So that's one of the challenges that the Navy faces, and that's one of the challenges that we're trying to spotlight with New York Council Navy League, the need on the defense infrastructure and the need to be able to support the Navy in this critical aspect.
Absolutely. And one of the critical points that Nora O'Donnell spoke of was the intel that was available that Taiwan has an objective, China has an objective of taking Taiwan back by 2027. What did you make of that comment that 60 Minutes reported?
Well, I think it was the CIA report that said 2027. I think it's been out in the news quite a bit. Obviously China has not confirmed that, but that it seems like everyone's focused on that 2027 could be a crucial year. With Chinese leadership, focusing on reunification, focusing on making their mark on the world stage, through various programs. You see the militarization of the island structure around China that allows them to put, shore basing for missiles, anti-ship missiles, etc., as well as other programs across the globe in their, something in road initiatives to help build infrastructure, particularly port facilities around the globe.
Well, one of the things that stood out in this interview, and was a point made, was Nora O'Donnell and Admiral Popero were on the bridge of the USS Nimitz looking out at sea, and all of a sudden there is a U.S. Navy submarine surface, which was identified as the Los Angeles class submarine. One of the older subs, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to me the Admiral was making a point that the U.S. Navy has a very strong submarine presence in the Pacific.
Well, obviously, no one's going to tell you how many subs are on the way at any one time. But that said, and I think the Admiral correctly pointed out, that one of the strategic advantages that we have as a naval force are our submarines. One, they're nuclear. They're all nuclear submarines, which means they can stay at sea for a very long time, and they stay relatively quiet. But that's going to be a key component in any potential conflict in the Pacific area. It will be our fast attack submarines, both the Los Angeles class and the Virginia class ones that are coming on, that are being built and being commissioned today.
And one of the points that we could read into the NATO summit meeting that seemed to be very united amongst the NATO member countries, and also now you have an alliance with Australia and UK to build more submarines, is the thought that the way to 1,000 ship fleet is through allies. Is that really possible? Is the coordination of they do RIMPAC, a big gathering of navies from various countries, allies? Is that a work for showing that amount of naval power?
The concept of the 1,000-ship Navy has been around for several years now. And part of it is the fact that we do depend upon our allies. So is it attainable? I mean, I don't know how many ships are out in NATO, but I think one of the byproducts of the Ukrainian conflict right now is that NATO, the military side of NATO, needs to even be more focused and more integrated to handle the issues over in that aspect of the world. You combine with the fact that, both the Philippines, Japan, Australia, UK, and us are, we've always, we're trying to work together. But, we bring our allies and our partners together. That's a force multiplier. The United States will never be able to produce 1,000 ships. We're struggling to get to 355 as it is. But we can expand that capabilities and allow certain capabilities that are not necessarily resonant within our fleet, that may be resonant in another fleet, to be that force multiplier.
Absolutely. We're talking to Frank Russo, president of the Navy League Council of New York, retired captain in the U.S. Navy. Frank, how many years service did you provide the country in the Navy?
I did a total of 26 years, 9 years active duty as a surface warfare officer, and then 17 years as a Navy reservist.
Well, thank you for your service to our country. Hey, we just have about a minute left. Maybe you could mention some of the activities and events for the Navy League this fall.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate that opportunity, Ken. One is right now we're planning our second Maritime Security Conference where we focus on the role of the Merchant Marine, U.S. flag Merchant Marine in national security. And this year we're focusing on the Merchant Marine aspect in a contested environment, both from, as we like to say, from brown water, meaning the rivers, ports, the green water, down to blue water, in their support of the Navy and the Joint Force in an overseas battle. It's an aspect that gets overlooked.
Absolutely.
As I joke.
What's the date on that one, Frank?
That is going to be on October 5th. And right now, we're finalizing the lineup of our keynote speakers as well as our panelists, and more information will be forthcoming on that shortly.
We'll look forward to a terrific event. I enjoyed attending last year. Frank Russo, Captain, U.S. Navy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you to your listeners. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to CaMMVetsMedia on WVOX AM 1460, heard around the world on WVOX.com. We thank today's special guest, Captain Frank Russo, President of the New York Council Navy League. Remember to check out our Facebook pages, CaMMVetsMedia Sea Services page, our basketball report page, and our West Point football report page. And until next week, remember to thank a veteran.
New York State's most